Welcome, everybody. This is a very special day. It's for the first time our computational social science webinar at CUHK run into a technical glitch for live streaming to mainland China. It's so special that I thought it's because we have a very special guest, Professor Anning Hu from Fudan University. Is very special, not just because he's an old friend of mine in sociology, but he's a very distinguished, accomplished scholar in sociology and with an impact on outside the boundary of sociology. Let me briefly introduce him. Despite the glitches in our connection, he is currently the Vice Dean of Graduate School at Fudan University. He's also the university professor. Let me put a quotation mark, university professor. He's more than a full professor at Fudan University. It's not a typical honor, but he accomplished it because it's really, really special. As far as I know, he is the youngest, and I shouldn't say youngest. He's very young, of course. He got his PhD in 2012, only a dozen years ago, less than a dozen years ago. But he has already accomplished so much. He became full professor within 3 years at Fudan University. I think he's the fastest person reaching full professorship under the new up or out promotion system in social science in a major university in mainland China. So it's very special. And it's also special for other reasons. He's extremely prolific. By now, he has already published over 60 peer-reviewed. By my count, it's all social science, SSCI articles, and over 30 in Chinese top Chinese journals. So over the past 10 years or so, he has been, I should say, ever since he got his PhD, he has been like a publication machine. I thought this guy sounds so much like ChatGPT. He can push a button and then paper come out. He's not just collaborating with others. Most of his articles are either single authors or first author. So he's not following other big teams, but others are following him. So it's very special and having contribution in education, sociological research of education, inequality, health, culture, and religion, which was the starting point of his dissertation. And he has been co-opted to work in many different projects. And therefore, he has this kind of incredible publication record. Today, we are not selling his publication productivity. We are promoting, hopefully to learn from and promote his creativity in merging social network research and cultural sociology. He is very humble in saying that there's not that much computational element in his talk. Let's see. Let's welcome him and learn from his creativity. Thank you. The floor is yours, Anning.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Tam. And also, my special thank you to go to Professor Wensong Shen for both of you for your kind invitation to this webinar. And also, thank Professor Tam for the good words. That is really, I'm really flattered. This webinar is about computational social science. But before it starts, I chat with Professor Tam and said this is the research in disguise. It might not be so computational because it would not use many cutting edge fancy methods. So since it's a very it's a kind of traditional sociological research with some theoretical background, with some research questions. Hopefully, you could feel that this question interesting. I'm going to start, and feel free to ask questions. And if you have some longer questions, you can ask after this talk. So the title is kind of a little bit long. It's called Mapping Out the Interpersonal Boundary Stones in Contemporary China, Guanxi Network Structure and its Association with Traditional Cultural Endorsement. So this is the different components of today's talk, with the background, theoretical framework, methodology, major results, and the concluding remarks. So the background, I think if we, for example, if we go to the States and talk to some sociologists or the social scientists in general, sometimes we cannot use pinyin, right? The pinyin. But if we say, okay, about Guanxi, it's a pinyin. Many sociologists would understand what it is, what it refers to. So Guanxi is a very, I would say, a very hot topic when we want to study something related to China. I think in the late 1990s, there was a book describing different approaches to study Guanxi. Some scholars would argue that Guanxi is a part of Chinese culture, such as Mayfair Yang, an anthropologist, who argued that Guanxi is part of Chinese culture. So no matter what China would change with the social transition, Guanxi is still part of the Chinese daily life. But some other scholars, such as Tom Gold, from UCB, he would argue that Guanxi is part of the institutional environment. So if this environmental, so the institutional transition should be followed by the changing significance of Guanxi in China. So there are some theoretical or empirical debates, but no matter which approach you take, generally scholars would agree that Guanxi is very important, because it plays it assumes the expressive or instrumental functions in China. So if we move even further, if we get into the literature, we would find that the vocabularies, the words, the terminologies we frequently use to describe Guanxi come from the social network literature. For example, the dyadic relationships, such as the tie strength, to respond to the famous thesis about the strength of weak tie. It concerns about the dyadic relationship, the strength or the intensity of tie connections. But the concern, the one limitation is that a Guanxi network, if we treat it like the sui generis, a term, if you are familiar with the works of Emil Durkheim, it's something larger, it's something bigger, it's something independent. So it's a sui generis entity. It should carry information that go beyond the ego-outer relationship or the outer relationship, the dyads. So we need a holistic picture. This is one point. The other one is, sometimes when we talk about Guanxi, we are more familiar with the consequences of Guanxi. For example, you could use Guanxi to locate a job, to seek job on the job market. But sometimes when we talk about the antecedents, the prefactor of the Guanxi network structure, this kind of research is it's not as many as the studies on the consequences of Guanxi network. And sometimes we just turn to the so-called Guanxi basis. It's a terminology to describe some base or the basic factors to determine the Guanxi formation. For example, the common social identities. We are from the same hometown, 老乡, or we are classmates, 同学, so on and so forth. Or some, we are both men, both women, the social demographic variables. So this is another kind of, limitation. So in this study, what I do, is to involve three things. First, I try to empirically identify the distinct subgroups of the Chinese population. Each group would display a unique Guanxi network structure. So this is a kind of exploratory work. And the second one is related to the connection between the Guanxi network structuring. It's not about structure, it's about how you structure your Guanxi network with the traditional Chinese culture endorsement. So this is the second objective. Relatedly, the third one, I would try to look into some other social forces, such as establishment of the quasi, kinship relationships, such as the sworn, brotherhood, 拜把兄弟, sworn brotherhood, and also the subjective differentiation of family members. So by doing this, this study could move beyond the conventional dyadic focus and present a global or holistic portrayal of the Guanxi network structure. So this is one thing. Another thing is the detected correlation of Guanxi network structuring schemes. How you understand how you carve your Guanxi networks. This scheme, the relationship of this scheme and the traditional Chinese culture endorsement could better our understanding of the cultural foundation of Guanxi. So Guanxi does not exist in the vacuum. It has some antecedents, and one important aspect of those kind of antecedents would be the cultural factors of the cultural force. So these are the background. So the theories, the social network approach to Guanxi could be very common approach scholars adopt to study the Chinese Guanxi phenomenon. For example, in a recent, not so recently, but published in 2019, by Professor Bian Jie, he defined Guanxi to be a dyadic, particular, and a sentimental tie that has a potential to do something. In another paper, these two scholars defined Guanxi to be a personal network. It's very straightforward. They viewed Guanxi to be a kind of interpersonal network. But I think in a widely cited article, Chen and Huang, they lamented that Guanxi the network level studies are clearly lacking, which means we are so used to studying the dyadic relationship that we sometimes simply miss what's happening at the global level. What is the Guanxi overall? If we look at the whole structure of Guanxi network. But of course, we have some exceptions. For example, Bert. Everyone knows about Bert. A scholar from University of Chicago, and he collected. He published several articles using the data collected by himself from the entrepreneurs. So from those studies, we could describe we could get the picture of the social network characteristics of those entrepreneurs. And also, we have some studies, I think, led by Professor Luo Jiade from Tsinghua University on the internet users, because they collect data from internet. And of course, the major participants are the youngsters. So we have some exceptions. But still, we have no big picture about the whole population. So that is the one potential point we could try to extend. So the holistic structural features of a Guanxi network relatively receive very much less attention. So why do we don't pay much attention to this topic? I think one reason, but just personally speaking, I have no citation, but I think one reason is we have already some well-established model to characterize the structure of people's social network or Guanxi network. For example, this one, I think everyone who studied Guanxi would cite this book and another journal article from AGS. It's about 人情与面子, the favor and face. So in this book and also in that article, Huang Guangguo, okay, Professor Huang, proposed a 3 layer model. There if you handle the relationship with kinship members, such as family members, you should follow the rule of needs. If you interact with a person, for example, with a stranger, you will follow the principle of equity, the equal exchange. But if you handle the relationship with friends, you will follow the rule of favor. Okay, this is a very famous model, the 3-layer model. But how to use it? Sometimes we use the 3-layer model to simplify the Guanxi network. For example, if we have several referees in our social network, we could lump together some people, into one group, and we could split apart some people into different groups. But in practice, the way to set up the boundaries between different groups of people could be not so rigid, not so 3-layer structured, and it could be coarsened, it could be refined. This idea, this point of view could find support from another theory. It's called the nested identity theory. According to this theory, we establish our identities. We draw the boundary to distinguish between you and we, 你们 and 我们, right? Depends on people's balancing between the desires of inclusion and distinctiveness. So this is a kind of the a psychological process, and people with different social or sociological backgrounds might have different ways to do this kind of balancing. So because of this, we cannot expect the 3-layer model to apply uniformly to everyone, in contemporary China. And so, for example, according to Huang's original model, there is a special group of people who would lie at the edge between family members and with blood ties and outside of family people, such those friends, relatives, neighbors, classmates, colleagues, those people. And if we in the interactions with them, we follow the principle of favor, right? Face, 面子 or 人情, but those kind of things could malfunction, could work poorly because in the process of marketization and the population mobility and the increasing the rapid pace of life in China. So we can just imagine, perhaps we could if we stay in the same place as described by Fei Xiaotong, 生于斯 or 长于斯 and 死于斯, right? So we grew up and die in the same place. We could have enough time, enough energy or attention to handle the relationship with friends, with relatives, so on and so forth. But now, maybe we travel around, we mobilize from one place to another place. So those kind of principles could be useless, for most of the time. And another thing is, for example, according to Yan Yunxiang, the anthropologist from UCLA, and over the past several years, he published several articles and also a book, a collection of papers to describe the revival of feminism. He called it the new feminism, 新家庭主义, which means when people in China, people increasingly rely on their family members to handle the all kinds of problems. For example, for me, I have a kid, and I may have to rely on my parents or the parents-in-law to take care of kids, because otherwise I cannot fully trust the someone from the market and hire someone from the market that is not so reliable. So feminism could be a could be an emerging trend, and against this background, increasingly people could are inclined to make a kind of a binary or dichotomous distinction between people of us and people of others. So this is one potential extension to the three-layer model, to the original three-layer model. But at the same time, we may refine this three-layer model by adding extra categories to it. For example, we all know about the Confucian idea called Wulun. There are 5 ethical layers, called 5 principal relationships. So it's not 3-layer, it's 5-layer. Also, within the people outside of family, we could make a further distinction between the fictive kings and the acquaintances. So those are also a basic distinction. In that empirical research collected by the conducted by the research team of Professor Luo Jiade from Tsinghua University, they found that a common model is called a 4-layer model, not a 3-layer model. And this model distinguishes between family members, intimate friends, people with familiar ties, and acquaintances. So it's just 熟人. So it's not 3-layer model. To wrap up, the 3-layer model is a theoretical prototype. So family members, friends, and acquaintances. But we could have a more kind of a coarse-grained model, just to have 2 groups of individuals, people with affective ties and people with instrumental ties. We could have even a fine-grained model to have immediate family members, extended family members, close friends, and acquaintances. So that is, in a word, there are different ways to carve the landscape of our social network. So who can be counted to be the close partners? Who would be counted to be the intermediate ones? Who would be counted to be the remote ones? It depends. It's not, we should not follow a uniform theoretical model. But I'm not saying that Professor Huang Wang's model is not useful. But what I want to say is, if we put aside the theoretical model, maybe we could explore the empirical manifestations of those, Guanxi network structuring. So another thing I want to touch in this study is what factors come into play to affect people's networking practices. So here, we come across another kind of theoretical or perspective shift, because if we follow the structuralist approach, we would emphasize the predictive power of the structural relationships. For example, for those who work on social network analysis, if you use the ERGM, it's a special kind of method, you will, the predictors for something, a very special kind of predictor would be the network characteristics. For example, the friends of your friends are also friends. The enemy's enemies would be friend. Those kind of structural relations. And also the Guanxi basis would be kind of ad hoc, because it would focus on the ego alter shared social identities, all the network triangular relationships. But one cannot expect a strong tie to emerge straightforwardly between family members or people born in the same place. That is a direct critique to the Guanxi base ideas. Because according to the Guanxi base idea, if you have this base, if you have this, for example, if you are born, from the same family, if you are born in the same place, you should have a stronger relationship with each other. But that is not necessarily the case. And also, strong or weak ties in one social network would not be permanently the case. So they are not permanently distinct categories. So Guanxi should be understood as a kind of agentic practice, I just quoted this paragraph from Barbalet, who I think who used to teach in Hong Kong, but now I think he moved back to Australia. Yeah, I think Australia. But he published one book and several articles to argue with the structuralist approach. So if my understanding is accurate, he would he tried to endorse the idea that Guanxi is kind of informal institution. It involves the normative and obligatory factors. It's not a structure determined. It involves what we believe and what we think appropriate when we try to handle the relationship with others. So here, the last sentence was proposed by me. It was not written by Professor Barbalet. So I think what a social network analysis paradigm overlooks is precisely the symbolically written, politically charged, and historically positioned conditions for the emergence of a network. So the emergence of some network characteristic is not just the structural relationship within this network. Maybe we could find something outside of this network. So that is on one aspect of those antecedents would be the culture, things. This is not new to sociology because many sociologists of culture try to, have a dialogue with traditional idea. So the traditional idea would assume that the culture, the social network would determine your cultural orientation, disposition, or worldview, so on and so forth. But some recent studies would try to reverse the order. They try to look into how an agent's cultural adherence would affect his or her network characteristics. So this is the kind of reverse of the causal direction. This is very important because it could inform us how cultural capital could be converted to social capital, and it could also tell us how the symbolic and the social boundaries would interact with each other. So this is one theoretical reason to look into the cultural forces behind people's Guanxi network structuring. And in terms of the mechanism, why culture could come into play. The basic reason is cultural orientation could influence how one thinks categorically. So I think again, this is not a new idea for sociologists. If we look at the phenomenological research, if you come across a postman, you would not care about how he looks. Is he a handsome person? He's a postman, and he would come to your house to collect some letter, so on and so forth. This is a kind of a typical categorical way of thinking. So culture, in a sense, could direct us. Maybe it's not an accurate word. Could orient us to set up the boundaries between some mental groups of different cognitive objects. For example, if you grew up within some cultural environment, you might classify. You might follow some way to classify different kinds of food, spicy food and non-spicy food. Or some but in a different culture, the way to group different foods could be different. So of course, the different referees in one's Guanxi network are surely the cognitive objects. So if you follow, so your cultural orientation should work to change or to moderate or to govern in people's way of classifying different referees. So here I just look at the traditional cultural endorsement, and here, I just want to emphasize that there are different schemes to classify the referees in one Guanxi network, but this kind of difference is made in terms not of nature but of granularity, which means sometimes, you know, if we have different schemes of Guanxi network structuring, they have something in common, but they would be distinguished from each other in terms of some, for example, the granularity, you know, the extent of refinement, or one is more coarsened, the other one yeah, I just noticed a message from you know, the referee. The referee means the different you know, partners you would have the social, you know, interaction. For example, your parents, your friends, your classmates. That is the meaning of referee. I try to use in this study. And if you are culturally, if you follow the culturally traditional orientation, I would suspect, you know, this is just a hypothesis. I would suspect maybe they could, this kind of orientation could inspire one to lean toward the binary classification between family and non-family individuals. Because the collectivist nature of traditional Chinese culture would determine that, okay, what matters is not so much who you are, you know, as an individual, but what membership you have, you know, for example, which kinship group you belong to. And in contrast to this traditional stance, and modern cultural forces would encourage the kind of individualist orientation. And in this case, it's a kind of a person-centered orientation. And of course, even for the same group of family members, the person-centered orientation would try to identify who is your favorite one, who is your least favorite one, because now you would look at them not as a group of people, but as just a collection of individuals, and you would be more likely to determine, okay, your personal attitudes or your behavior towards them according to the personal characteristics instead of the collectivist identity. So that is the hypothesis. I would hypothesize that the traditional Chinese cultural endorsement would encourage one to have the kind of a binary, you know, Guanxi network structuring. Okay. So the methodology, I use the data collected by me. Okay. So I try the traditional culture and the cognitive pattern survey. This is an online survey. I try to design some questions that are rarely used by the existing large scale surveys. And this survey was conducted by a company not far from Hong Kong. You know, I think it's from Shenzhen or somewhere. And the data would be weighted according to the 7th census data. So this is an online survey. Okay, I just follow the generic you know, procedure to weight everything. And there are two noteworthy features of this survey. First, I ask a lot of people about the extent of trustworthy. You know, because in the past, usually we would have a big table of different referees or different individuals and ask the respondents, you know, how much you trust them. But that table is kind of a little bit simple, because it would for example, you know, it just, you know, parents or children, you know, in this way. So here I have a longer list of referees in one Guanxi network, from father to strangers. So make a more detailed distinction of different referees. And also I scale the reported trustworthiness to to be between 0 and 100. So if you use a Likert scale, it's from 1 to 5. Usually it's from 1 to 5, from the most most untrustworthy to the most trustworthy. So it's from 1 to 5. One potential concern is if we have so many referees, and the answer, the option is fivefold, from 1 to 5. We don't have enough variation in the responses. So because we have so many people here listed here, we need to extend the options of the options from 1 to 5 to 0 to 100. And in this way, I could describe I could be more enabled to show the variations in the extent of trustworthy between those so many referees, so many people. Okay, and traditional cultural endorsement. I have two, and I have two. Should we call it the index? No, it's not an index of Confucianism. I just collects some of those statements from the previous from some previous surveys. Confucianism, I list 7 statements, and I would ask respondents about the extent of their agreement with those statements. For example, many Confucian ideas are still applicable to Chinese today, and so on and so forth. And also, I have 5 statements related to traditionalism, such as Chinese people should live according to the way passed down by their ancestors. So 5 statements, and also taking into account several control variables, including age, the hukou status, annual income, the Chinese Communist Party membership, education attainment, gender, and marital status. So yeah. So the methodology, several steps. The first step is try to decompose the trustworthy correlation matrix. We can just imagine, we for each referee, we would have a reported, trustworthy, and so then we could compute the correlation, matrix of those different referees, and this is the basic material for the subsequent analysis. So the first step is to try to decompose the matrix into some subclasses of respondents, and within the class respondents would have a similar pattern of Guanxi network structure. So this is the first step. The second step is to look into each subgroup's Guanxi network structure, and I use the network partitioning algorithms. Okay, that is a point of computational social sciences. That is finally that is a moment computational social sciences gets into the picture, and those community detection algorithms are used and to further distinguish different referees. Okay. And the third step would examine, who are more likely to be classified into which subgroup. So this is a kind of sounds like a latent class analysis, but it's not a latent class analysis. It's just okay, we group individuals into different categories, and for each category, for each cluster, there would be a unique way to structure the social network, the Guanxi network. Also, I try to control for the potential confounding bias, use generalized propensity score adjustment or inverse probability weighting. Those are some routine operations for causal inference. Okay, here's the result. The figure in the left figure would show the variations in the reported trustworthiness across those long list of people, and on average we could find that people with close ties, such as parents or other family members, would be taken to be more trustworthy than the remote ones. and this is so. So in other words, I don't think this is a surprise finding, because it would follow it follows the idea of 差距格局, right? You know, the idea proposed by Fei Xiaotong. So we would have a stronger connection with close people, and a weak connection with people, you know, remote. And then the strength of the correlation of the reported trustworthiness could be we could construct a kind of the trustworthy matrix, you know, as shown in the figure on the right. So we could find that there's some kind of clustering. You know, the reported trustworthiness between referees is not uniformly distributed. So since there are kind of evident patterns of clustering, for example, a cluster could contain the cousins, friends, classmates, hometown fellows, colleagues, you know. So there's a cluster, you know, yeah. Here, there seems to be a cluster here, and there seems to be a cluster here. So just the first glance, you know, we could tell that there are different kinds of people in our social network, in our Guanxi network. But if you trust someone, it would mean that you would trust someone else, but not some other, you know, referees. That is the meaning of clustering. And then I would use correlational class analysis to first distinguish people into different groups. And in total, 2 subgroups are identified. So this is subgroup 1, and this is subgroup 1, and this is subgroup 2. And so 53% of the respondents would be classified into subgroup 1, and the remaining 47% would belong to subgroup 2. So I use different kinds of community detection, you know, algorithms to further cluster or detect the communities within each subgroup. And we can find that, you know, this is a modularity score. Modularity score, and several algorithms would report the same network partitioning scheme, so they would have the identical modularity scores. If we look at the subgroup 1, you know, it's featured by the family and a non-family distinction. So those with blood ties and the in-laws, they would have the intensive and the positive within group correlation, which means that, you know, a high level of trust in one would indicate a high level of trust in the other, in that, you know, cluster. But at the same time, the referees outside of family, such as friends, acquaintances, and those with a very minimal social context, constitute the other community. Like here, this is the outside of the family. This is within family. So we have 2 groups. And also the connection between them is not so strong, which means the kind of, you know, this boundary between the family and the non-family people is, you know, relatively clear cut, you know, between them. And relative to this picture, you know, if we look at the subgroup 2, it would you know, the pattern would be a little bit more complicated, and there are generally 4 communities within this subgroup of individuals. 1 for parents, father and mother, which is here. Here this is father and mother. This is a nuclear family: daughter, spouse, and son. And 1 for the other family members plus close friends. Close friends here. This is close friends. Close friends is counted as along with the other family members, and the remaining people outside of family would be grouped together, including acquaintances, ordinary friends, you know, those people. So this Guanxi network, it's very interesting because if we compare these 2 subgroups, in subgroup 1, close friends here, close friends is counted to be some referee outside of family. But in subgroup 2, friends can be counted to be someone kind of perceived equivalent to the other family members other than the parents and the people in the nuclear family. Okay, so to altogether, we have 2 groups, and now we could label group this group subgroup 1 to be 0. This is I want to label it to group 0. This is group 1. What's left is to conduct the to fit the logistic regression model to see who are more likely to be in which group, and this is the result. As shown, people who embrace the Confucianism are more would have the significant negative coefficient. Since we group this one to be 0, which means people who are more who embrace, since Confucianism are more likely to be classified into the binary classification subgroup, which that is a kin versus non-kin dichotomy. And for traditionalism, it's the same thing. If you use a generalized propensity score adjustment or the weighting, the same result would come out. I also conduct some supplementary analysis to check the role of the quasi kinship relations. If you have some quasi kinship relationships such as gamma, 干儿子, it's not the it's not a step, but it's kind of the quasi, it's not, I should not say it's not real, but it's not so real, because it's not based on the blood ties. And if you have this quasi kinship relationship, I would expect it to encourage one to lean toward the more complicated Guanxi network structuring, because if you have this kind of relationship, that means the kinship versus the kin versus non-kin boundary can be penetrated through some kind of manipulations or artificial manipulations. It's not the natural one, but through manipulation we could have some kinship relationship. And also there are some family relative preference. This is based on the question about among those family members, do you have some specific preference, or you have some you could explicitly state which one is which one you love best and which one you don't have a good rapport with, so on and so forth. So as expected, quasi kinship relationship would show a positive coefficient, which means it would encourage one to lean toward group 2, subgroup 2, this group. Okay, so to conclude this study, I think the first implication is the Guanxi network structure is heterogeneous. We have some mature theoretical ideas about the Guanxi network structure, but what is more important, I think, is to look at the empirical data, to look at what's going on in reality, and of course, we could identify several patterns to structure one's Guanxi network. But this study should not be taken to reject the idea of Professor Huang Guangguo, because it does not mean the role of interpersonal dynamics in China has changed. We cannot show this. What we show, perhaps people just use these roles in a different way. So this is the thing. The third implication would be would concern the tricky role of sworn brotherhood. Because those fictive kinship, the close friends, the fictive kinship people its role could be weak in a sense, because some people would treat them as family members, and some people would treat them like the people outside of family. So this is this would be in line with the existing literature. And the last one would be the distance between the standardized cultural text and the living, culture in people's mind. For example, the Guanxi-based idea would posit that, if you have this base, Guanxi base, you would have this Guanxi. But that is not the case. So in this light, I think this study would lend support to the ideas of Professor Barbalet, who would contend the contingent obligations in the process of the significance of contingent obligations in the formation of Guanxi network. Okay, I think I need to leave some time for the Q&A. So I think it's time. I should stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Anning, for controlling your time very well. You have used up only 35 minutes. Oh, actually less than 30 minutes. So you say us some time despite the delayed starting point. I would like to invite our audience both to indicate your wish to raise questions by entering into the chat box. That's easiest for everyone to see the queuing. And Eric is the first one who have raised questions early on, and also follow-up questions as well. Let Eric do it first, and then Zhao Liping would be the second. The floor is open. Eric.
Okay.
Eric, you're muted. You're muted. You're still muted.
Yes.
All right.
I actually sound much better when I'm muted.
Okay, good.
Well, first, Professor Hu, thank you for a very stimulating, thought-provoking presentation. I mean, there's a lot of information there that you conveyed. My questions will probably be poorly formed as a response, but just some smattering of comments. First of all, I do think this is very interesting. I think that, there was some comment at the beginning about the computational coming later, right? And a little bit and sort of a modest computational element. But I do think that when we talk about computational social sciences, we need to make sure that, computational is an adjective, right? And the social sciences is, in a sense, the focus. So I do think that on the whole, it is important for us to begin with the sort of the theory and the research questions, and with the social sciences as the substance of what we're addressing primarily, right? And then think about how a computational elements might add to that. And so I think that your presentation was a very good example of that, a very sort of rushed but nonetheless comprehensive overview of some of the general questions that are posed in this context of Guanxi relations in a social science context, and then kind of allowing that to proceed in a fairly natural way or organic way to then formulating some questions that might be addressed empirically, and then thinking about how the computational elements might be added to that. So I do think that the way you're framing it is a good model for many of us to sort of follow and to emulate in our own work. So with that general comment, one kind of small comment I have, when you were talking about kind of the dyadic relationships, et cetera, and in this context, what I was thinking about was, when I think about, the term dyadic relationship, I think of kind of person A and person B and a kind of an arrow connecting them and whatnot. And then in a sense, that's what you were doing in a sense, in your empirical work, right? You were looking at a lot of, if we're talking about me as sort of the center of the, as one point in a dyad, then you're looking at, well, what is the strength of trustworthiness with person B? What about with person C? What about person D? So in a sense, empirically, I can sort of think about you're having a kind of a list of A with B, A with C, A with D, A with E, right? And so you've got these kind of hypothetical dyads, and then you're measuring, in a sense, trustworthiness with respect to each of those, and then kind of doing the partitioning. And so, and I think that's a sensible way to proceed. But a couple of comments. One is that when I think about the sort of A and B, in a dyadic relationship, and if I think about Guanxi, and I'm not in any way, I don't have any scholarly expertise on Guanxi, but when I, based on what little I know, I think of that dyad as being, in a sense, contextualized, right? That we think about this underlying kind of culture, and I kind of drew it in my notes, kind of a cloud, right? There's this kind of somewhat nebulous sort of cultural backdrop to the way A and B are posited, right? So if you and I are A and B, and we're in the kind of the Chinese cultural cloud, the way we operationalize that dyad may be different than if you and I were in the United States, and there's a different sort of cultural cloud as a backdrop. And so I'm wondering whether that could be operationalized somehow. And I'll just have one more kind of question, which is, or kind of comment on the trustworthiness. I'm just wondering, I mean, I think the way that you generate those partitions is really fascinating, and they do seem intuitively plausible. So I am inclined to sort of give it credence. Nonetheless, I'm just wondering, when on a kind of survey, whether there's, we know that in survey data, there's a kind of tendency for people to almost respond almost kind of as they should, right? And so, of course, Mama is, the most trustworthy, right? And of course this, and so almost a kind of not necessarily thinking about how do they actually operationalize it in their own lives, but almost reporting back to you on what they think the answer ought to be. And I'm wondering if you have any way of kind of checking against that. And one idea I had about that might be to see about operationalizing, and I really haven't been able to push this idea any further, but if one had just, for example, data on co-investing or something, right, where people are putting their money where their mouth is, right? And yes, do I lend money to these people? Do I or do I let them look after my children, or do I, some kind of empirical test to see whether trust is as trust does. It's not just that they say that we trust, but you look for evidence that they engage in activities that demonstrate trust. And I'm sorry to have gone on so long.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Eric. And I think you made three comments. And the first one, I really appreciate your kind words. And but put those aside, I can't agree more, because I'm majoring in sociology. So on my part, I think the computational tools are instruments to answer some substantive questions. Sometimes I just feel that if we want to compete with computer science scholars or statisticians, we cannot win, by focusing on the method. But we know the theoretical questions, and they if I may say, they don't know so much about the theory as we do. So in this regard, I can't agree more about your comments. We should try to use computational technologies to serve our research, substantive research questions. The second comment would concern about how to operationalize the Guanxi. I think it's related to the third one. You're right, because I asked each respondent to evaluate the trustworthiness of so many people in his or her social network. So in this way, it's we could draw a nebula of trust, with each respondent at the center. And if they have a stronger trust in for example, in father or mother, we could have maybe the red line, and if they have a lower, the trust level lower than some threshold, we could have a black line, this kind of things. But what I do is to kind of transform this kind of egocentric trust network into a kind of a matrix, which means, okay, for everyone, they would have a list of different, trustees, if we may call them trustees. So what I want to ask is, if you trust your mother more, would you like to trust your father more? If you trust your classmates more, would you like to trust your hometown fellow, the tongxiang more? So this is kind of what the clustering I try to review. So in this process, each individual would the respondent would disappear. What I have, what I preserve would be their reports, their answers. Okay. And the third question the third comment would concern about what trust is really is. That is indeed a very, very a good comment, because in the study of trust, sometimes we use the game, the game, the lend money or this kind of trust games to gauge to quantify the trust. So I think that is one limitation for my research. I could ask people to report the extent of trustworthiness, but I don't know on what basis they made this, kind of judgment. For example, everyone trusts his or her mother, but we don't know whether or not it's because their mother support them materially, or their mother a mother, the blood tie connections. So that's a big limitation, because I cannot contextualize, I cannot place the reported trust within some context to know better about what, what's the meaning of trust, or what's the basis of trust. And also, I also agree that this reported trust might change if we switch to a different scenario. For example, we trust the mothers, or we trust classmates in one situation, but maybe if we switch to a different scenario, for example, would you like to borrow, lend your money to your classmates, or would you like to do something, maybe you say, oh no, I don't want to do that. So the trust would go down. So yes, this is a limitation I have to acknowledge, and thank you very much for pointing that out. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for the elaborate questions. There's a follow-up question, another question by Li Ping, very sharp and clear in the chat box.
Oh, chat box, okay.
Yeah, it's about a relationship between Guanxi and social capital. What Li Ping want to elaborate or not?
Okay, well,
thank you, Professor Hu, for your wonderful presentation. I really learned a lot. And I wonder, have you discussed the relationship between social capital and Guanxi in this work? And because I heard you mention a little bit in your talk about how Guanxi can be transformed into social capital. So could you explain more on that front? Because I think Chinese Guanxi usually contain a negative connotation, that you use Guanxi to gain resources that you don't deserve. But in terms of social capital, it usually have positive connotation that help the society to function. So I wonder what is your opinion on this front?
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. To be honest, I try to avoid mentioning cultural capital in this work, because that is the social capital literature is such a I would say the deep water, and if I frame my study into the social capital literature, I would be lost. To be honest, I would be lost, because as just mentioned, there are some dark side and a bright side, and the social capital, how to measure it, and I have to accommodate James Coleman and Lin Nai and Bian Yanjie, and so many big names would fly around, and okay, okay, no social capital, but so just to focus on the Guanxi and place it a very localized Chinese thing. That's what I try to do in this study. But you said, okay, the Guanxi and the social network. I agree with you that Guanxi could be sometimes to be a negative connotation, because people could take advantage of Guanxi to get what they don't deserve. Well, they don't deserve. But I think that is a very just off the top of my head, I think this is a kind of very situational way to understanding Guanxi. We place Guanxi or social capital into a specific scenario and check if it's positive or negative. But if we step out aside of this situation, just focus on the general social capital, depending on how you measure it, that would be a different thing. For example, is social capital not good or bad, but then maybe is social capital related to something we want to work, and in this way we don't have to get into the debates about the bright side or dark side. We just try to approach the social capital issue in a kind of the neutral way. Okay, so I just want to check if social capital would be related to something. You could but maybe I'm wrong, because in this work I try to avoid the social capital literature. It's a deep water.
Yeah, because I find in the literature it's also blurry when they try to distinguish social capital and Guanxi. So I feel also confused. Yeah.
Right.
Thank
because
you.
Yes, so Guanxi is kind of framed to be a maybe I'm wrong, but I, based on my understanding, Guanxi is more native. So when we talk about Guanxi, sometimes we just turn to China. Okay, it's about something China, something about Eastern Asia. The Eastern Asian people would do these things in this way. But if we talk about social capital, Putnam would show up, and it would about the community, about association, participation. So it's I don't think there's some gap between these two things. All right.
Okay, thank you for the question and answer. The next one is Jacob. Jacob, are you coming on to explain your question, please?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Right, so thank you for your presentation. My question has to do with, first off, I understand this to be something of I mean, for what it's worth, it's you're collecting this data like at one point in time or a small segment in time, and that like dynamically a lot of these levels of trust could change according to someone mentioned before, like based on the context, whether it's about lending money, coming into the hospital if you're in that situation, in intensive care, if you've had somebody who's been passed away close to you, you have a breakup, all types of different. So I guess you could like, in a sense, you may want to hedge a bit in terms of like, these are like kind of generalized levels of trust not generalized in the sense I'm talking about, but like generally speaking, and that it could vary by domain. But like, I specifically think that, you know, one of the things that makes social network analysis so interesting is how these different dyadic relations interact, not at the dyadic level, but more on the structural level in terms of dynamics like triadic closure and balance theory dynamics, and those kind of more complex kind of relationships. And I'm been troubled in my own survey research, like how to ask, like keep things simple, but also balance between like simplicity and like survey design, and then like also getting at complexity. I'm thinking this one question in particular where we decided to ask people, you know, how supportive their friends were of them going abroad, and then we could have asked like separate questions for like family members, and then you know, family of like affiliation, and then like family of association, like which would be like your romantic partner. But in the end, I said your family and your romantic partner, and then we got some pushback, like just like one or two people saying, you know, there could be disagreements. There may be different levels of support from your family members and your romantic partner. But because like romantic partners, you know, some people have, you know, very and more intense romantic ties to their partner, even though they're not married, than a lot of husbands and wives do, or spouses do, who are married. So this seems to be something that could be very useful for helping people like calibrate that. But I'm just wondering how you think about those tensions. And that comes into play with respect to Eric's comment, because for example, let's just say we're gonna take his example of like how much you would lend money to. Well, everyone's money is limited, right? And so then it becomes a question of competing kind of interest, and how you're going to rank, prioritize giving your money to one person over other. And of course, if you have a lot of money, then you can, you know, make it rain.
Right.
In America. But if you don't, then you may be like very, very cautious about even lending money to a family member. It's your own survival, right? That's at stake. So there's that. Now, methodologically, I'm very curious about if you could elaborate more when you use these algorithms, because I've used these community detection algorithms, and I feel a lot of us as social scientists can't really get our heads around how they actually function. Like, how does the Leiden one work versus the like spin glass one? And I'm just wondering how you assess the modularity scores, and rather than just throwing everything into the kitchen sink and like trying everything and then seeing what gives you the best kind of most satisfying result in terms of confirming your theoretical prior. Like, how do you actually assess the merit of these different algorithms in terms of drawing your final conclusion about what is the best kind of fit, best algorithm to model your data and to draw your conclusions from? Because for me, it's, at least from my limited knowledge, I myself have a hard time assessing the merits of them. Okay, I'll stop.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Jacob. I think, you know, you made 3 points. The first one, you know, we could think about some, you know, dynamic models to try to get more. Maybe if my understanding is accurate, you know, to get more information from this data. Yes, I think I can try to you know, in this direction. The second one, I think, is more fundamental, because if we use survey to collect the information from respondents, we have to be very simple. Otherwise, they would say no. They would just turn around and say, okay, I'm not going to answer your survey. In fact, for this survey, you know, it's online collected, and for I think for when they finish one questionnaire, they would get some benefits. I can't remember the exact number, but several yuan, you know, per copy of the questionnaire. In fact, it's a little bit long. Because I also conduct some, you know, conjoint or factorial experiment in this survey, and ask a lot of questions about their mind. But this is something convenient because I could use one survey to collect a lot of information using very simply designed questions. But as you said, I cannot contextualize all of those stuff. In fact, in one of my courses, it's kind of the practicum or something like that, a field research. When they do the qualitative studies, they could contextualize this stuff very maybe more easily. Just to use the example you just mentioned, the romantic partnership. In 1 year, the students in my class, they would ask the couples, the couples, how much would you spend for the gift of the Valentine's Day? So I think it's much better than the questionnaire style. How would you trust your spouse? How would you trust your boyfriend or girlfriend? Because it's more direct. It's about your behavior. It's not about the attitudes or something in your mind, because it's changing all the time. But the problem is when they try to do this on campus, at Fudan, they quickly got into trouble because the couple would find that they spend different amount of money to each other. Someone spend more, someone spend less, and that would be a big conflict for that couple. So this is I think if we want to become more contextualized, we may have to face the challenge of it's mainly the new challenges. So on my part, I would still advocate the survey based. Maybe the questions could be simple, but at least we would avoid a lot of the daily life challenges or troubles when we proceed the same kind of question in a qualitative way, in a face-to-face manner. And the third one, for the different algorithms, I have to say I'm very lucky because for different algorithms, I would get the same result. So in this case, the result would not be algorithm based, but for some other studies, I was not so lucky because if you adopt different algorithms, a different result would pop up, and this is in my opinion, this is a disaster, because that means your substantive conclusion is not so robust. It could be very sensitive to the algorithm in use. So for this study, I just reported, I don't have this kind of concern, because different algorithms would give me the same result. So in other words, no matter which algorithm I use, I always get the same conclusion. But I think that is the challenge, not just for this study, but the general computational social sciences. When you use some machine learning algorithms, you have so many parameters to tune, and we cannot always use the default option. Sometimes we have to tune the parameters, so on and so forth, just like the data massage and the parameter massage, and to get what you get. This is kind of it's not a p hacking, it's just some pattern hacking, something like that. Yeah.
You call that data mining and fishing for good patterns. Well, I see that our time is up. The normal time is already over at 11, but since we delay a little bit, so let me use the role as chair to share my final wish for you as a sociologist, as a chair of this CSS webinar. The main takeaway for me at the beginning of your front end of your setting up the theoretical motivation for this your empirical investigation is the following. You see the difficulty of applying traditional network analysis, network type of data collection, and so on, to really study the Chinese concept of Guanxi. And the difficulty is traditional approaches are highly structuralist and static. When we do dynamic modeling of network data, it's still about evolution of structure. Whereas the theoretical conceptualization you help us to zoom in on today about Guanxi network is, you think is intrinsically situational, agentic, and so on. There's agency in it. That the traditional paradigm of analyzing network runs into a wall. It will be a disservice to the empirical understanding and analysis of Guanxi if you stay with the traditional approach. Then you share with us. I am grateful for your trust in us to share your exploration into broadening, extending beyond traditional way of data collection in network, and so on. And the way you do it is, on the one hand, you have data on the 3-layer dimension, which is very traditional, minimalist definition of social distance, and therefore you have a 3-category, 3-layer right there as your anchor, and you add to it another dimension by highly disaggregating each layer and ask questions about trustworthiness that you think and you hope would articulate much better with the concept of Guanxi. I have reservation about that because of your own answer to Eric's earlier question. When you recognize the situational nature of Guanxi and even trust, in that context, you were answering the question of trust. Actually, you were trying to elaborate your concept of Guanxi being highly situational. You should, and you could have designed your elaboration of the opposite dimensional extension of 3-layer by asking situations. By identifying domains of situations, you could effectively break out of the traditional box of structure. And with those domain-specific specification of trust under different circumstances, invoking different so-called layers. You can elaborate the layer a little bit, but eventually you have to have those situational dimensions to really articulate with your theoretical ambition of bringing in agency and breaking out of the traditional structural conception of network. I think that is a valuable venue for you to elaborate your research. If you can elaborate, say, into 20 additional categories of layers, elaborating layer into 20, I would say maybe elaborating into 9 or 10, that's the max, and then elaborating on another dimension, namely the situational domains. Then you could much more easily to articulate with agency than just on the structural side. Elaborating on the structural side would not get you as far as expanding into 2 or 3 domains of events. That would be my hope for you in your future elaboration of your work. And I think that will be a potential fruitful way to extend your research program started here. I applaud you for your creativity in trying to bring in the theory and the methodology of a network and extending it in ways that I wouldn't be able to do 40 years ago when I started doing network research. Do you have any comment before we close today's discussion? I don't expect you to have immediately generate and assess feasibility and so on. But that's my wish for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mm.
Really thank Professor Anning Wu and everyone for generating very useful questions, enlightening questions, and look forward to hearing the next stage of your project.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you for-
my great pleasure to have this presentation. And thank you very much. Thanks
Yes.
a lot.